So since everybody's already been fully addressing these questions, and if I replied to them I'd just be saying the same thing over and over again like everybody else already did, I figured that we could kind of just look at the way the questions are phrased and discuss the main topics that are in these questions. I think that would just be a kind of different, interesting perspective to add to all of this. And there's a lot of topics that I want to talk about and I feel like I need to talk about, but they don't have enough substance to be put into a video, so they do relate in the questions that are here, so I might as well just address them this way. There's just also a bunch of thank yous and stuff at the end of the video, and this is a pretty long video, heads up, you probably already know. Without any further ado, take it away, Dreadlocks.
Are you able to understand the irony of responding to the perceived political correctness of the left with exasperated reactionary hypersensitivity of your own?
So the way that a lot of these questions are phrased is just in a kind of got you kind of way. It's like taking questions that people usually ask SJWs and then going, let's flip them on their head because you're really the mad one, not me. And they're just phrased in a really, really weird, vague kind of way. Like, what do you mean by hypersensitivity? I mean, I suppose you're kind of comparing it to PC culture and all that kind of stuff, but there's still a lot of stuff going on in there. I mean, when you talk about political correctness and that kind of thing, people have been fired for telling jokes, people have been sued because they disagree with your political opinion, all that sort of outrageousness that people associate, like banning words, with political correctness is done by feminists and social justice warriors and that kind of thing. A lot of the time there's just this big disconnect with jokes. Like, people take the jokes as serious things and then saying, why are you freaking out? Why are you exaggerating? And then try to point out, hey, you're actually the crybaby. You're actually the triggered one. When it's just a joke and it's a persona that people put on. It's just kind of disappointing where you have something where you could actually ask real questions about real issues and actually try to start a conversation and be reasonable like the actual title of the video says. You just try to flip everything on its head and point fingers.
What is it with you people and skulls?
How do you define right-wing? Anti-SJWs often have an aversion to being labelled as right-wing, yet they regularly defend the right and bash the left. Therefore, why is being labelled right-wing a bad thing to you? And if it's because right-wing is used as a pejorative, can you not see how labelling people as SJWs or regressives is also pejorative?
People call me right-wing, it's just inaccurate, so I want to correct them, because I'm not right-wing. I mean, it's like if I called you Samoan or something, I don't know. The thing that I want to address is, why is a political position like right-wing or left-wing used as an argument? Or it's just a blaming tool? I mean, you go into the comments of one video discussing a problem, and depending on the type, you just get, oh, it's those damn leftists, it's those damn right-wingers, it's those damn conservatives. And I know that there are definitely crazy people on each side, and in my personal opinion, I don't give a shit about any of them and they all suck. But I don't see how just blaming one group for all of your problems is supposed to just make everything go away. And again, we come back to the whole, you're the one who's doing it, not us kind of thing. And just another thing, a lot of feminists and SJWs use the term right-wing as an argument to dismiss people, just like the term you're a white male or you have too much privilege or that kind of thing. I just think it's kind of strange how people would use the argument, you're right-wing so I shouldn't listen to you, but then later on just say, well, why do you get triggered when I call you right-wing? I mean, you're just being triggered for no reason. That doesn't make any sense. I think if some people are getting angry, it's because you're using it as if it's an insult. Just this whole idea in general of there's these political parties, these two political groups, and that's it. And they have to be at war with each other, and then you have to keep blaming the other one, and blaming the other one without ever knowing what actually is going on or what people actually think. In those groups is just not doing anything. Well, actually it's just delaying everything. It's not helping anyone. It's just making people look like a bunch of crybabies.
Rather than telling people you disagree with to drink bleach, wouldn't it be more productive for you to have an actual conversation about the issues you feel matter?
Can I not do both?
Or is it just easier to do the bleach thing?
Well, I don't know. Is it easier to just press the block button and further enclose yourself in your tiny little bubble of a safe space instead of actually going out there and talking to people in the first place to engage the conversation? Instead of waiting for someone else to do it and then complaining when no one does because they don't know that you want a conversation in the first place and you've never come forward. Unless you just expect everyone to automatically know who you are.
You claim to be proponents of rational, logical, evidence-based argumentation. That's great. That's entirely laudable. But when I look at your online activity, when I look at, I don't know, for example, your Twitter feed, that's often not what I see. How do you reconcile this claim to be evidence-based and rational and logical against stuff like, oh, I was just trolling you, oh, I was just shitposting, or TLDR?
Almost all of these questions so far are just about jokes. One of the major things that I've noticed in these kind of debunking people who aren't SJWs and proving they're wrong kind of things is just jokes. Like the time that Onision tried to debunk stuff that Blair White said, but all he did was just attack her jokes, as if he didn't understand that they were jokes, and that they're supposed to be inaccurate and over the top and exaggerated. There's just differently phrased versions of jokes are bad, why are you making jokes? Stop making jokes. Start policing your community. Name calling is bad. Start policing the people in your audience. Ban language. Why are you not banning words? Words hurt. Start banning them. That's all really it is in the end. It's either that or, if you're really for equality, have you read these books and studies that I just pulled out of my ass? Because being an egalitarian is not actually about having the beliefs that you need to be an egalitarian. No, it's about reading things and banning words because people's feelings get hurt. And if you don't do those specific things that I tell you to do and know of these specific things, are you really an egalitarian? Are you a true egalitarian? And there's this other expectation of, it's this idea that you always have to be intellectual and super smart and super on edge all the time. And I'm not just talking about social justice warriors, just any kind of extreme that's more on the supreme ideology kind of thing, where you have to be on all the time. You're not allowed to have jokes or just talk about things that aren't really important and have fun and be stupid, and you always have to be fighting for this one true goal or this one true ideology kind of thing. Like, you notice people taking breaks from feminism and doing that kind of thing as if it's a sin, as if they always have to look through the lens of fighting for this one true goal that's really vague and not really accomplished at all. Like, if you're really an intellectual, why did you tell a joke that one time? Why are you not constantly arguing with people about your beliefs and proving your beliefs with papers and tests? Why are you taking a break like a normal human being? Why is there this massive thing where we have to automatically be intellectual all the time? The ultimate goal in life is to not just prove that you're right all the time.
No, seriously? What is it with you people and skulls?
Are you aware that the ridiculous buzzwords you helped to popularize, like SJW and cuck and regressive, have all lost whatever meaning they once had and only serve now as catch-all insults and pejoratives to derail any meaningful conversation?
I actually have a question for you. Who's really in charge here? You or that 70s porno mustache that you have? Well, unfortunately, that's what happens when a word gets popular, really. It is kind of annoying how every time there's a word or some sort of thing that pops out, people always manage to use it as a scapegoat. I acknowledge that. But how can you say that and then not acknowledge all of the times that people have used racist, sexist, homophobe, Islamophobe, transphobic, anything under the sun like that to completely just destroy someone in the public eye. And those things still have effect, they still work. I mean, you call especially a white guy like racist or sexist or something, and then you could get him fired. How can you phrase this question in such a smug way and act as if that sort of stuff just doesn't happen when a feminist calls some guy a racist or a sexist? As if it's entirely the fault of everyone who isn't part of your little bubble.
For the last time, what is it with you people and committing actual literal felonies? Like, you might want to work on that? I mean, I thought the Ralph retort was so rational when he was fantasizing about beating up women with dyed hair, but then he assaulted a police officer, and finally I was convinced.
Honestly, I kind of expected a question like this, coming from the same kind of group of people who say that all white people have some sort of original sin simply by associating through skin color with the same group of people who did a bad thing a long time ago. Same thing with men. You're born a man, well, you've associated with a bunch of evil men in the past. Because that's totally by choice and everything. So you have to continuously whip yourself until you get rid of all that horrible evilness inside of you. Lumping people together is never a good thing, so I don't really see what the point with this is. You're just proving further that lumping people in is one of the things that you do when you're in social justice. If you have an opinion or a political perspective that can be adopted by basically anyone, you're gonna get mad people. You're gonna get unhinged people who will use this as a reason to do horrible things. I don't see why we should label everyone who happens to associate with the same ideas as that person with something bad.
In videos and in the comment sections, anti-feminists often take up the most extreme or the weakest feminist position they can find, or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is. Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find and really challenge yourself?
What arguments are exactly misrepresented? But people mostly just talk about the feminism that actually affects people. The type of feminism that worms its way into laws and social attitudes and just general life. And while there may be some really interesting, really weird, obscure paper in feminist intellectual heaven, the feminism that goes around in society, the mainstream kind of form of feminism, whether it be sex negative, sex positive, whatever the fuck, social movement feminism, is the one that most people talk about because it's the one that affects everyone. I really think that you should prove how people are misrepresenting things when they say the wage gap isn't because of sexism and that kind of thing. That's just a really broad statement that seems really dismissive. And that's a common thing in these questions again, just a really dismissive kind of thing. Like, let's push all of your questions back onto you and say that you're actually the one that's doing it. And not only that, you're being a broad statement. And you have to prove why you're not being that. The questions kind of just throw terms at you and expect you to defend yourself against them, rather than just actually asking you of something. And I'm not gonna wholly blame these people, because when you ask these kind of questions, they are very general. You're not talking to someone in a discussion, you're just asking a bunch of questions. So it is kind of hard to word it that way. It's not their fault. But that being said, the level of smugness and the reasonable questions bit at the title makes you think that you could have at least tried a bit harder to get rid of that BuzzFeed kind of feel.
I am deeply concerned with male addiction rates, suicide rates, and abuse rates, because I have worked with these issues in the quote-unquote real world. Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the greater good of addressing these issues, especially as the kind of solutions needed are not necessarily gendered? And if so, I would actually like you to let me know, because I'm not fucking around or presenting any gotchas here. I actually really think that we could get something done if we work together. So yeah.
Another common theme in these questions is, do you acknowledge that this is sexist to men? As if they're trying to trip you up by going, you've actually been being sexist to men all along. You think we're the sexist men because we're feminists. No, you are. Are you acknowledging that saying harmful words is sexist to men? Why do you continue to engage in this behavior? When will you police it? And it just seems really hypocritical to have this kind of statement like, are you willing to put aside your differences? Are you really? When I see people who aren't feminists make charities tell people in bad conditions to help feminist issues like women in war-torn countries and that kind of thing. Feminists themselves label them as harassers, say that they're trying to be evil against feminists or something like that. And this whole thing about the solutions not necessarily being gendered just sounds weird coming from a kind of ideology where everything is gendered. Everything. And the solutions have to be gendered as well.
What is third wave feminism? Because I've often heard you folks insist that you have no objection to feminism in general. It's specifically third wave feminism that you have a quarrel with. So what is third wave feminism specifically? And what specifically about third wave feminism do you have such a problem with?
Holy shit, it's Steve Shives. He finally came out of his basement after 50 years. Well, I actually prepared a list of things that I find annoying about third wave feminism, so if you would allow me. The demonization of men, their quest to ruin everything fun, my video games, their obsession with race, their hatred of free speech, safe spaces and overuse of trigger warnings, the destruction of the words rape and harassment, their hatred of masculinity, their quest to destroy due process and law, the feminization of the education system and the neglect of men at that expense, lazy academia, whining, their intolerance towards the discussion of genuine rape culture in Islam, while pushing the blame on white males and saying that that's all the rape culture. And that's not really even the half of it, that's just some stuff that I wrote down as it popped into my head about 5 minutes ago. So if you really want the full list, I can come back with more.
Why is it that this feminist represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists?
Whoa, wait, sexism all of a sudden? Ladies and men are different? So we're supposed to punch men and not hit ladies and open doors for men but not ladies? Fuck you, get out of my face, you tiny piece of shit.
It's just funny how there's this stereotype and this joke that's been building up, and then it's a real person. And not only that, but there are entire different little offshoots of these groups who actually have people like this everywhere. And that's just terrifying and funny at the same time, and that's why people keep talking about it. And also, again, seems a little weird coming from the same people who equate all white people with white supremacy because of some KKK members a long time ago. And the same ideology who did that BuzzFeed video with how's it feel to be the same gender as Donald Trump, as if that's some sort of insult against all men. Just seems a bit odd.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists? Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
Okay, so just a quick note. I originally kind of came into all of this stuff thinking about the topics that were being discussed, but there were just some things, you know, the things that you don't really think about that just go over your head and then you don't realize till later. One of those things was kind of like community and that kind of thing. I thought that the term community was just like a nickname used to describe the topic, because I wasn't thinking about the word topic. I didn't really realize that community lumped everyone together, which is a stupid thing for me to do, but oh well. So I don't really think it's a community. I was kind of using community as the term topic when I used it before, but if that's the case, then I redact that statement and I don't use the word community anymore. And yes, I agree. If you don't support a particular idea, you shouldn't have to defend that idea if you don't agree with it. I think this kind of goes back to this whole thing about polarizing opinions. Like, if you don't agree with this group, then you're automatically put into this group. Everyone just shoves you into that group. And if you try to say that you disagree with something in this group, people just put you back into that group. Like, you disagree with something a feminist says, then people think you're an MRA. But if you disagree with something an MRA says, you automatically just put back into feminist group. Like, oh, you had something to say about feminists, but now you're acting like one. I thought you weren't an SJW, then you said something I disagree with against the opposite side, and now you're an SJW. I knew it all along. That kind of thing. Which also comes back to the right-wing, left-wing kind of thing. Everyone is automatically put in one of those groups, and if you disagree with someone on one side, people automatically label you as the other. That's also with arguments. If you disagree a little bit with this opinion, you automatically are in this opinion for some reason. And that is a problem. That's just a problem in general, and I felt like I needed to go on that tangent to just explain that kind of thing. I find that really annoying.
If SJws
S-Jews, as opposed to rest of the alphabet Jews?
are bad because they spend too much time whining and don't talk about real problems, then why aren't you talking about those problems instead of just whining about the other people over and over and over for literally years? I mean, in the scale of priorities, that's like even lower, right? You know, you've got the real problems, you've got the things that feminists worry about, and then you've got you going, oh, how dare they? Just how dare they have different priorities from me? Why can't they do what I do? Whine about whining forever for a living. That's healthy.
A whole lot of these arguments so far are just, you think you're really doing something important, but you're not doing something important. You think you're talking about real feminist issues, but you're not. If you actually knew about feminist reasoning, you'd be a feminist. People talk about these things because they are non-issues. It's like trying to fix something when it's not broken. You'll probably just end up breaking it, and it'll probably end up worse than you thought it was. And so with all the problems going on in the world, trying to keep it from getting worse is a pretty ideal thing to do. It's not really about what's worse than something else, it's what's a non-issue and what is actually an issue. If the wage gap in our current society was directly targeted at women because they're women, and then they earn much less, a noticeable amount that does really oppress them, then it would be perfectly fine to talk about it. I wouldn't really be making the women in third world countries have it worse argument as much, because it is a real issue, so you should be able to talk about it. But if you're making an issue out of nothing and you're just making it worse as you go along, I think people should be able to call you out. And what is with this long drawn out condescending humor? I mean, I know you're trying to make it funny and edgy, but you just look like Peter Pettigrew.
Does it maybe say something? Why don't you seem as concerned with actual feminist theory in academia as you are with wrecking people for views?
Yet again, we still have this logic that if you were looking at serious feminist academia, you would be a feminist. There's no doubt about that. That's not a real feminist issue. Here's a real one. And someone else comes along and says, that's not a real feminist issue. Here's a real one. Is the only reason you're pointing to the mysterious and vague academia is because you know the most common feminist issues are a joke, and so you want to try and distance yourself from it like it's damage control?
Since so many of you profess to be admirers of second-wave feminism as opposed to third-wave feminism, I thought it would be interesting to ask which second-wave feminists in particular do you appreciate? Which books written by second-wave feminists have you read and found interesting? Which second-wave feminist activists have you specifically admired as you formed the opinion that you like second-wave feminism but you have no use for third-wave feminism? I'm just curious.
I don't really get this whole have you studied for the exam kind of feel. If you really know what you're talking about in feminism, name me some authors, name me some activists. Have you actually read thoroughly through every single paper of feminist academia? Do you actually know about the high-hanging fruit, or you just want to wreck people? You don't know shit about feminism. If you've actually known anything about it, you would be a feminist. And most people have said Christina Hoff Sommers for the second wave feminism thing, and I'd agree with that. But if anything, the fact that a lot of feminists don't consider her a feminist anymore, and she says she's been kicked out of feminist academia and she's been booed off stage and all that sort of stuff at feminist events because of saying stuff that makes sense, it proves how weird the movement has gone. Why is she not considered a feminist? She has good values, she works in that kind of field, she has a lot of really good considerate values and aims. Why is she not considered a feminist?
You do understand that reading the title of a book or an article or watching the first 15 seconds of a video is not going to give you a deep, nuanced understanding of what that book or article or video is about, right? That being said, how can you expect to understand or critique feminist sources if you don't even attempt to understand what they're trying to say?
I don't really understand where questions like these come from, or why they're here. This is something that does affect people in general. There are people everywhere with all sorts of opinions who do this kind of thing. Why are you saying it like it's specifically just these bunch of people that are doing this sort of thing? I mean, it's not like PZ Myers, a feminist, looked at an Armored Skeptic video and only looked at the first couple minutes and then claimed that he understood the whole thing and that it was all garbage without actually listening to the opinions. It's not like that happened. This is one of the annoying things that I see. People will go into someone's argument and say, well, you clearly didn't understand the source material, otherwise you would agree. You clearly misrepresented the argument and you don't know what you're talking about. Despite how much work you could put into something, despite how much evidence you would have, people would just show up and accuse you of not understanding things. Because clearly, if you understood it, you would agree with them. There's all just this condescending kind of thing where you look down on someone and call them an idiot, then you refuse to explain to them anything that you need to, or correct them, and actually talk about things instead of going, well, I obviously shouldn't explain it to you if you're just gonna not understand it and misrepresent it. And then you wonder why people don't really want to follow the ideology or the movement. They don't want to be talked to like they're an idiot, and then when they ask for an explanation, they don't even get one.
Why is trying and failing to debunk a study into sexual assault the number one priority for a rational thinker now? Does it maybe say something about your priorities? Does it maybe? Nah, it's fine, it's the feminazis, we have to stop them. They're taking away our video games. Look, Anita, I'm sorry, but I can't... We can't actually destroy video games. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so right now we're getting into the whole academic freedom kind of thing, where they try and basically flip around the argument about academic freedom and freedom of speech and all that kind of thing. It just looks like to me that people have been called out on feminist statistics and all that kind of stuff that has been debunked a million times, and now they're trying to say, well, it's academic freedom to let us present those statistics. You can't just debunk them and say we can't use them. That's not freedom. And this whole idea that if something is a study, you should just leave it there. And if you try and debunk it, well, there's more productive things that you could do. Why don't you do your own study? Why is this a priority? Well, it is one because it's clearly dealing with information that you spread to people to educate people on an issue. And if that statistic or that study is not representative of reality, you're misleading people to have a false perception of reality. That could cause a lot of harm. That is pretty important, especially since it's being taught to people my age in universities and even younger people in school, people who will grow up with this perception who are very impressionable. Obviously that's a big deal, especially if it's clearly false, dishonest, and it's been debunked so many times, but people are still talking about it as if it's true. You have the freedom to go out and make these studies, but if it's an inaccurate study, it's not against academic freedom if we have to test it. If anything, it's against academic freedom to have all of these random statistics and studies out there that are clearly wrong, but you're not supposed to actually fact check them. You're supposed to just leave them out there. That goes against anything about education.
One of the major arguments that I see in many of your videos is that it is possible to separate criticism of the religion of Islam from the actual Muslim people. And yet, this line seems to be crossed very often. I see things like raghead or camel fucker or other things like that in your comment sections. I see people taking very serious shots at Muslims in videos and hangouts, and they don't get called out, at least not that I can see. So my question is this: why should a person of conscience who is concerned about the Muslim people and their community not being harmed or mistreated, why should they believe that you're actually only attempting to look at the ideas and talk about the ideas if you ignore bigotry that's occurring right in front of you? And in that light, would you be willing to break bread and salt with moderate Muslim people on your videos, have hangouts, invite them to your channels, just in order to build some bridges there and to learn more about what they think and how they feel and what their experience has been, so that information and knowledge can be furthered?
We're also getting into the questions with policing other people. There are a lot of bigoted people in the world. There are racists and people who there are people who find something to discriminate against and then they'll just go full force. They'll use all the names, they'll single you out, they'll do whatever the fuck. If someone is calling people names and they're being bigoted but they're not actually doing anything productive, then okay, they could be being an asshole. That's bad. I don't like that either. But why then make the statement about certain people in certain areas who are doing this kind of thing and then act like everyone's doing it and saying, would you be willing to build a bridge over this? Would you be willing to put aside your differences? Even though it's coming from the group who won't put aside a difference of gender or skin color at rallies, or continuously say how race and gender need to be united to fight all of the problems in this world, and yet ban men and white people from certain rallies because of the evilness. As long as someone is being a decent person and willing to listen or have a discussion, I don't really care what they believe in. It's fine. And as for other people, I know that sucks, but that's kind of getting into, if you want to ban a certain type of behavior or language, how far does that actually go? And that won't change anyone's minds. The only way to change minds is to actually engage what's going on and talk about it. It's the same reason why if you ban someone from going to a Trump rally, that probably just makes them double down their opinion. You're not changing anyone's minds, you're just making yourself look worse. You're making yourself look like you can't actually offer any sort of counter argument or any sort of reason why this thing shouldn't be going on. You just want to ban it so that you're excused from having to explain anything or take any responsibility.
Do you deny that systemic racism against black people is like a thing in general? If so, what? Okay, just step up, just cover your ears for a second and let the smart people talk. If not, why is it so much more important to you to demonize groups like Black Lives Matter than to actually use your platforms to discuss actual solutions to issues surrounding race and racism?
Black people are not being persecuted. Get over yourselves. Then how will you convince me of your opinion? If you really want to be so condescending all the time, then how do you expect to actually sway people? Again, we're coming back to this whole, well, you clearly don't understand. Why should I bother explaining to you? You're just misrepresenting everything. It's not demonizing to point out what people are doing. If Black Lives Matter does a bad thing, and I point it out, I'm not demonizing them, I'm just stating what they're doing. They're the ones making themselves look bad by doing that kind of thing in the first place. And loads of people have discussed solutions. It's perfectly reasonable to do both of those things. You can criticize something and then come up with your own conclusion and your own kind of take on the issues and what's going on. People that I've seen talk about Black Lives Matter just list what they're doing and then say how those things are dangerous, and they clearly are dangerous, and then people as a retort say, you're demonizing them. Stop demonizing them. I think Black Lives Matter are demonizing themselves then, because they're the ones who are doing the bad things.
If you've ever discussed or done a video about black on black crime, when are you going to do a video about white on white crime and what we as white people can do to solve the problems in our community?
When white people are the minority but produce a disproportionately large amount of crime for their size, and then they have a domestic terrorist group trying to spread lies about what's actually going on and make problems worse. That's when.
Why is a literal teenager's different definition of racism from you so horrifying that you all have to go, no! No, we have to stop him! We've got to debunk him now! Ah!
This is a teenager who has been indoctrinated so much that they're saying the most horrible things. It's terrifying to see someone so young being pushed to such a big limit like that. It's a terrifying thing. It looks like they're just being brainwashed. And Milo is older than me. So for me to see someone around the same age as me is fucking terrifying. Particularly since I was kind of going down the same road, but then luckily I just realized that it was all bullshit and snapped out of it. The problem is that now you get young people that are being absolutely indoctrinated into these things because these things just feed off the natural teenage kind of feelings of not belonging anywhere, not understanding the world, feeling like no one understands you. You don't understand yourself, all of that teen angst, stupid stuff that happens. It makes teenagers feel like there's this thing that they can go to now to say, I can define myself and I have to define myself. And then there's all these arbitrary things, along with the promotion of the idea that victimhood and being unique and overly special is somehow trendy. And they basically turn into these really insensitive, really out of touch, really hateful people. And then there's this whole delusion of them thinking that they're doing something right when they're just hating on an entire group of people for no reason. That is a completely terrifying thing. And when you see that thing manifested completely into one person who speaks exactly that, exactly all of that stuff you were fearful was going to happen, of course you want to point it out. You want to say this is a real terror that is going on. There were some kind of hateful responses, sure, but people will rather just showing how crazy people can get under the influence of all these ideologies and debunking the points that Milo made. That was the main thing that was going on. Just personally, when I see people like that, I just feel kind of heartbroken. I mean, coming from the person that was almost like that, it's this really terrifying thing to see, and kind of breaking away from that kind of mentality was really hard to do because it was basically reshaping the entire perception of reality that you have developed and is the only one you have ever known. In my case, kind of reinforced by my parents. And I can see why someone like Milo might not break out of this mentality, because the idea of breaking away from it and starting to doubt yourself is just so terrifying because you can't imagine anything else. And your whole world is just unraveling in front of you when you start doing that. Coupled with all of the annoying teenage feelings and that kind of thing, I understand why people around this kind of age would just double down on the craziness instead of actually trying to get through all of this stuff. One of the things that you would wish for the most is a guiding hand that would kind of hold your hand throughout this whole thing. And when I see people like Milo, I just want to say, I will do that for you. I will hold your hand through every single step, no matter how many steps there are, until you stop acting like this. And it kills me because I really want to reach out, but I know that I will never effectively do that. At least not right now. So that's why some people freak out. It's just because of a kind of sibling kind of affection where you see someone who is just turning into a horrible person and you know you can help them, but you know that they won't listen. And that's how I feel for a lot of people with the social justice kind of thing. Because I have personal experience with knowing how terrible it makes you feel, and how hopeless you feel because the entire world is so horrible in your eyes, and that everything is problematic, and that can be horrible. And it's heartbreaking to see because I know that the world isn't actually like that. So I just see someone who has this worldview that is making them feel way worse than they actually could. That there's a whole better place out there. So yeah, people are freaking out because it's a big deal.
Wherever did you get the idea that racism was a self-applied identity? And if the only true racists are the racists who self-identify as racists, how can we ever expect to make any social progress to reduce racism? Or did I just answer my own question?
Congratulations, Steve. I guess you won the argument, because I have no idea what the fuck that means.
You often say that you are for equality of opportunity, but if people of color, for instance, have to overcome barriers whites do not, such as discrimination and unequal treatment as are well documented in various studies, then how can the current situation be thought of as equal opportunity in any real way? And why do you consider it racist to discuss these issues?
I don't really get this massive gap between white people and people of color, as if white people aren't included as having a skin color. I mean, if you're saying that because white is a shade, well, black is a shade as well, so you're still wrong there. I just don't understand this big separation between white, everyone else. Men, women. Oh no, I'm sorry. There's 75 other genders that apparently exist. Of course we don't have equal opportunity, but I just think that the assumption, just immediate assumption that it's automatically affecting this people of color and women is just absurd. It affects every group in some way, and I would love to hear these various studies that you seem to mention. It's weird how you just made this vague assumption with vague words like various studies and that kind of thing, and then jump straight to this weird conclusion that people think that these issues being discussed, like the actual discussion itself, is somehow racist. These questions are weird in the way that they present something like a concept or an action that's being taken, and then they try to throw a label at it like sexist and racist and that kind of thing, almost as if they're trying to throw back the idea that we're not actually the ones who think everything is racist and sexist. You're trying to stop us. You're the one who's against freedom of speech and academic freedom. You're the one who thinks it's racist and sexist to do everything. And it just comes across as not really making sense. This whole questions video just seemed like a wasted opportunity.
Do you understand basic English syntax? Like, you know, if I say this cat is pretty, I don't mean that all other cats aren't pretty. Like, do you really not get why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is not only racially insensitive, but just patently ridiculous?
I don't understand why there's such a big argument going on about the words and the grammar and the English language in this context. People talk about Black Lives Matter in this kind of way because of the actions and the things that people say in that group, which makes it seem like they are trying to be superior, that they want special treatment. That's what it is. If someone came up with a group, Black Lives Matter, and they're like, we want to do stuff about poverty and education in the black community, and then they just go and do that, it wouldn't sound like they're saying only Black Lives Matter. That's fine. People wouldn't really have anything wrong with that. If it's a good group, you'll get supporters. But it's the things that they've said. So just saying, here's a lesson in the English language, you're wrong, just makes you look like you don't understand why people don't like Black Lives Matter. And where is the representation of the No Lives Matter community? I think that's being very discriminatory.
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women and therefore be comfortable with feminism as a whole in order to get laid, and that reduces us to beasts? If that was the case, wouldn't I attempt to get laid from my views instead of not ever trying that?
Wouldn't it be offensive to women to assume that every woman who's not a feminist is automatically a slut that wants to get male attention? You're not the only one who can play this game.
If you say you're an egalitarian, will you call out the man-hating slurs that you see coming from people within your community? People who use terms like cuck, beta male, faggot, or mangina? All of these things basically distill men down into thinking that the most important thing about them is to be having sex with a woman. That's rather offensive. So what are you doing to stop this kind of behavior in your community?
Whereas your approach to an issue might be banning one behavior, banning another behavior, banning all the behaviors, why don't you just let people be people on the internet and realize that everybody gets called names? Faggot isn't a gendered slur. You spend 5 minutes on the internet and you realize everybody gets called a faggot. You faggot.
What is the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of dislikes, the number of retweets, the number of subscribers, any of those numbers, any of those metrics, what have they got to do with the argument? Deepak Chopra, for example, a man who trots out an endless stream of pseudoscientific quantum woo bollocks has nearly 3 million followers. So what? Those people follow him because he tells them what they want to hear. Why even mention the number of followers you have? What difference does it make?
Why do you move like Jack Sparrow on meth? I barely see that even pop up though. I don't really see why this is a necessary question. As with a lot of these things, I just see it as, this behavior is mean. These are trolls. Trolls are bad. What are you doing about it? Nothing? You're not virtue signaling hard enough. You're not banning people or policing their speech. Why aren't you doing that? That's bad.
Why is it that you go on and fucking on about safe spaces and trigger warnings and delicate little flowers, but continue to hide behind your cartoon avatars and your childish pseudonyms? And whenever anyone calls you out on your sexist, racist, homophobic, bigoted rhetoric, you become the argument of your own scorn and are hashtag triggered, as they say.
This is the kind of it's okay when we do it thing. There are people in this video, as has been mentioned multiple times, that don't have their faces out there, that are hiding behind avatars, you could say. But if you ask them about that, they'll say it's because of harassment and the internet is a dangerous place, which is all well and good. But obviously, extending that logic to another person who happens to have a different opinion to you is just impossible. It has to be because it's something to do with their movement. That's it. It's not they have normal human emotions and concerns and they'll do something along the same logic as someone else purely because of the movement. That's when it's hypocritical. And I don't really see that comparison here. Hiding behind an avatar for protection and anonymity isn't the same as going into a safe space and hitting the block button 50 million times.
Are you willing to publicly acknowledge and admonish the massive amount of hatred, bullying, harassment, and intimidation that a lot of your fans infringe upon people? And I don't mean these tiny disclaimers that you put under the description fold or flash for 2 seconds at the beginning of the video that you know nobody reads. I mean a public and ongoing anti-bullying stance. Or do you kind of like watching your fans go around harassing people and calling them slurs and telling them to kill themselves? You kind of like it, don't you? I mean, if that's your thing, and I guess that's just what you're into, just makes you a dick.
This is just something in general that I think is really weird. The whole virtue signaling thing, like the idea that to prove that you're a good person, you have to point at people who are doing something that society deems bad and then continuously call them out on it. And it's almost as if it's proving, I am not like these people, and you're distancing yourself from them because that's how you prove you're a good person. It just kind of reminds me of 2 Minute Hate from 1984. It's just this, that in order to solve a problem or to prove that you're doing something about your activism and that kind of thing, you have to point at the people who you deem bad and continuously show your moral outrage at that person. Like, if you have a clear reason to talk about them or you want to discuss the general issues around that thing, that's fine. But just pointing at them and saying, they're bad, I think they're bad, look at how good I am, isn't really helping, especially if it's just policing other people's language. This whole concept in general just seems a bit pointless to me.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that feminists are being harassed online?
Everyone has the potential to get harassed. If someone is actually getting harassed, then I think they should go through the proper measures, and it doesn't matter who they are. If they're getting harassed, they need help, and that's fine. Most people just question it a bit because this is coming from a group that has used the word rape and harassment for everything. But you kind of have to question what it actually is now. And that is a really horrible thing to do, you know, to have a rape victim and they make a claim, and then you have to actually spend so much extra time actually further questioning it than you usually would for evidence and that kind of thing, because you just don't know anymore. If you use the word harassment, people aren't questioning you like, oh, you're a feminist, I don't believe you can get harassed. People are questioning you because they want to know if you mean actual harassment or they called me a bitch on the internet.
Do you understand the key importance of reproducibility and repeatability in scientific research? That's simply going to Google Scholar, doing a 30-second search for keywords and pulling out the first paper you find that backs up your stance is not a particularly credible way to do research. That you have to have a much broader overview to read the material, to follow the citations through, to look at the broad brush approach to a particular problem. You do realise that you're as much of a social justice warrior as those you critique. It's just that you espouse a different form of social justice, a rather less considerate, rather less forgiving, rather less kind form of social justice.
Okay, this guy. What's with all the windy, really big sentences with the really big words and moving from side to side? You look like you're trying to just make the issue sound way more convoluted and way more intellectual than it actually is. I'll admit it, if it makes me sound like a dumb person, I don't know what the fuck you're saying half the time. I have to replay it a couple times and decode all of the words that you're using and in the context that you're using it. The most effective way that you can bring across your ideas is if you say it in a clear, plain, simple way. Just trying to communicate it as a normal person. Stop trying to use all the big words to make it look like this amazing, super nuanced, super smart point that no one's ever thought of before. Because the only thing that that's doing is confusing people. I don't really understand this kind of thing, it's just irritating. That's something else in these questions. Some of them are simplified, yes, and they're very clear to understand, but every now and then there's just a super intellectual, I am superior to you in every intellectual way because I read a book and I use big words kind of thing. And it's just complicating the entire issue.
If you identify as an egalitarian, then I'm interested in your take on the usefulness of the concept of the original position as laid out by John Rawls in his theory of justice.
I don't know who the fuck that is. I'm sorry.
As a supporter, as a proponent of freedom of speech, why do you want to quash academic freedom? If you're not familiar with the concept of academic freedom, it's worth, in the UK at least, looking up the 1988 Education Reform Act and seeing what that says about the rights of academics to put across unpopular opinions.
I've kind of already addressed that whole academic freedom kind of thing, so I'm kind of gonna skip it. Jack Sparrow, calm the fuck down, please.
Why are you so obsessed with Anita Sarkeesian?
If there's a thing that's really entertaining, doesn't really harm anybody, and it's a pretty cool medium, and it's followed by a variety of people of all different types, and they're all genuinely good people, and then someone comes along and destroys everything about it, and basically makes it look evil to the public who might not be a part of that community, or have an interest in those things, and they don't really know much about it, and it makes them think that you're a bad person, and the things that entertain you so much, that are really cool things, should be banned, or should be taken over by something that really doesn't give a shit about it. Wouldn't you be upset by that? I mean, some of my favorite games are Shadow of the Colossus, Bioshock, Fallout. My favorite game is Curse of Monkey Island, and I really like The Legend of Zelda as well. Basically anything under that title. And all of those games would basically be bashed because they have either a damsel in distress kind of thing, or they hurt the female character in some kind of way that isn't really a problem, but it's being made into a big problem. And the way that Anita Sarkeesian talks, she makes it look like she just wants to ban everything. So if she got a hold of those favorite games of mine, she would probably just ban them. And that's just horrifying to me because those are my childhood. And they didn't harm me in any way as a female. They didn't make me feel persecuted. They didn't make society act weirdly towards me in any way. I don't see all of this horrible stuff. I just see good games.
Do you really think you can spend your entire life in a perpetual state of emotional immaturity? Do you actually imagine that you will be able to perpetuate your adolescence for your entire existence? Wait, didn't somebody else ask this one? Wait, I gotta... Ah, fuck.
You tried. You almost made a joke. Okay, so I just want to finish this off with... I heard that Shoe on Head gave me a shout out, which is really cool, so I want to say thank you. I don't actually have Twitter. I mean, I have an account, but I forgot the password and it just never really seemed to be a big deal. So if somebody else did something nice as well, I'm sorry, but I don't actually know what's going on, so I don't know that. But thank you anyway if you did. And thank you to everybody who just came along and decided that they like the channel. I mean, I know I'm just starting out, everything's really cringy. I don't have any equipment yet and all that sort of stuff, but thank you for being patient with me.